All right, tonight's debate was broadly seen as having the potential to turn the tide in what has been a close race for the White House. We know new polling out shows that former President Trump has been pulling ahead in some of those panels. Calvin Dark, Jack Kalavritinos back here tonight. We're waiting for those first polls to come out afterwards. But, you know, momentum recently, Jack, has been in the former president's favor. New York Times poll had him up 4 points.
Yeah, and it really is about the battleground states. Like, in my mind, those are interesting, but it's always about the states that comprise the 38 electoral votes. People don't realize this, that Trump's not going to lose anything that he won last time. All he needs are 38 electoral votes. So we're talking about the Georgias, Nevada, Arizona, maybe Michigan. And I think he's going to go up in those. And I don't think he's going to need to debate after this. So, I mean, I think this was the Biden administration's one chance to debate, and Trump's just going to decline debating after this.
There was one scheduled in September that ABC News was going to handle. Do you think it behooves the president to at least say we'll do this again, or do you think, as a Democrat, they need to back off?
There's a lot we got to talk about before September.
Let's do it.
I'll put it like this. I don't have any inside information as to what is happening in those Democratic circles, but there needs to be a discussion, and we can see from social media that it is. One of the things that I hope, because, you know, we're seeing everything from, I think somebody used one of the DEF CON levels, I'm not sure which one. I think whatever discussion is had among Democrats, Republicans, Independents about this performance, that it is about the job, that it is not anything personal, that this is not seen as something, you know, that Biden had a bad night because of his age. And I think if we have that discussion, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Exactly. And I think that I was watching on CNN, I think one of the Republicans made this point and said, honestly, shame on the White House, shame on Jill Biden, shame on the family, because they knew this was capable, and this is what Joe Biden is like behind the scenes and often on stage. And we have gotten to this point where now John King is getting texts from high-ranking Democrats saying panic stage. So it really is shame on the Democratic Party. They should have really looked harder at this and opened up the primary process to the Gavin Newsoms and others who could have made it a real primary, and RFK as well.
Yeah. So looking at that right now, I mean, you have Vice President Harris in the Trump campaign put out a video basically saying, hey, look, you know, here's Joe Biden, and if something happens to him, it's going to be Kamala Harris's game here. I mean, is this a serious discussion you think that would be happening?
I think, yeah, there's going to be a serious discussion about whether he is up to the job. But I think a second level to that is the election isn't just about the White House. Like, I know that I need a strong Democratic candidate so that the Republican Mark Robinson in my home state doesn't win for governor.
North Carolina.
And so I think that a lot of Democrats down ballot are going to be considering this isn't just about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And I think that's something that the world saw tonight, that it's bigger than both of them because both had serious issues that we need to talk about.
One thing that Vice President Harris said on CNN tonight to Anderson Cooper, who was pressing her for answers, was you're judging him on an hour-and-a-half debate. Why are you not looking at three and a half years of his record? But I think perception in many cases is reality when you see that play out, Jack.
And it's surprising to me that they had her defending him, because she is actually a weak point in this administration. And if Joe Biden is dumped before the convention, there is no doubt in my mind she will be also. But yeah, it is about 3.5 years. I don't think this president defended his record very well. I think that Donald Trump won the point, are you better off now than you were? And when Biden was bringing up COVID, that really rang hollow, and I thought that was one of his mistruths, because he was talking about how Trump failed COVID. No, Operation Warp Speed was on his watch, and he did everything he could to keep the economy strong. So it's really false for him to say that. But anyway, you have to defend your record. I just don't think people are coming away from this debate saying, you know, Joe Biden properly defended his record.
One of the things a lot of Democrats who have been running, not just on the presidential level, but in many of these Senate races and congressional races, they're talking about democracy vis-a-vis January 6th. And that was something that came up tonight. And granted, you know, Democrats are saying, well, look what happened January 6th. Why aren't we winning on that? Why aren't we winning on abortion? Why aren't we winning on the fact that Trump was recently convicted? These things are coming out. They think that they would resonate, that they would be winning some of these swing voters, and that's not happening.
Well, I think that's also one of the consequences of Biden's performance tonight. And, you know, let's say for the sake of argument that that's just his performance. it's not just about him, because what he wasn't able to do was point to the fact that the person beside him, not only because of his legal issues, but about January 6th. From my count, Donald Trump denied January 6th being a big deal about 3 or 4 times. And there were several moments where Biden wasn't able to call out the clear distinction. Yeah, I agree with you. He did not talk about his record, and he did not talk about it in the context of what the alternative was in the last term and what it could be if Trump is reelected.
All right, so I let him start. Jack, I'm going to give you the last word.
All right, well, when it comes to this whole thing about democracy, I was very happy to hear that Dana Bash asked the question, do you really think that the millions of people that are going to vote for the former President Trump actually don't believe in democracy? I think it is one of the worst things the Democratic Party is doing by making it sound like people like me who worked in the Bush administration, the Trump administration, other Republicans are somehow not for democracy. And I think there are many points the Republicans are not making, such as the White House attack on the Supreme Court and certain justices, loosening up voter ID rules, the border by allowing illegal immigrants, then possibly giving them the vote. So I don't think Republicans should give up that point and should say, hey, you all don't have a monopoly on democracy.
Well, if they are not having the discussion on stage, it sure will be done through surrogates, debates in congressional and Senate races, and by discussions like these. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Calvin, Jack, good to see you both.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we are back after this here on your Final Five.
The innocent